Thanks for returning to my channel. Things my dad didn't teach me. So a couple of weeks ago, we actually discussed or gave an introduction to mastering your credit. And it was only like a 3-minute video. But today, we're actually going to go into detail. I'm going to walk you guys through how credit works, things you should consider, things you should and shouldn't do. And we're going to, put a strategy together to actually clean up your credit. So I hope you actually enjoy it. Subscribe, share with other people. Again, our objective is to master our money. So this is one of many of the videos that I've actually posted in different areas. But again, I'm sharing with you things that I've learned along the way and things that people have actually shared with me. So I'm just going to pay it forward. God bless. Today I'm going to walk you guys through tips on how to fix your credit scores and maintain your credit scores. So again, we're just going to walk through this thing in presentation mode in a PowerPoint. So our agenda: what impacts your credit score? Where do you stack up against other Americans on your overall debt usage? How to grade yourself in terms of your debt utilization. 10 things you should know to improve your overall credit score, and then we'll summarize everything we actually talked about today. So what actually impacts your credit score? It's a combination of 5 different categories. It's your payment history, it's the utilization of your credit, it's the number of inquiries into your credit, it's the different types of credit card accounts you actually have, and it's actually the total length of your credit history. So for some people, they may have got their first credit card at like 18 years old. So from that point forward, your credit history actually started from that particular point upon which you borrowed your very first dollar from somebody. But let's talk about how this is all broken down. Your overall credit score is contributed in these 5 different categories with various percentages impacting it. So your overall payment history represents 35% of your credit score. The credit that you've actually utilized, meaning the percentage of your total lending, available lending, will determine a portion of your overall credit score. We'll get into a little more detail about how much of your total credit you should actually utilize at any point in time anyway. The number of inquiries represents 10%. And then the different types of credit card accounts you actually have, or credit accounts you actually have. It's not just down to credit cards, because there are student loans, there are home mortgages, there are auto loans, there are various types of credit lending scenarios that you have to consider. And then the overall length of your credit represents about 15% of your overall credit score. So if you were to take a look at this, just in terms of your on-time payment, your payment history, and how much of your credit you've actually utilized represents 65% of your total credit score. So if you can just master paying on time and making sure that you don't max out your credit utilization, these are the big ticket items that have the greatest impact on improving your overall credit. So let's talk about things you must do. Things you must do. So you should always pay on time. Always pay on time and within those terms. Meaning, if there's a minimum payment that you have to make and you're kind of hard pressed that month to make a payment, at least make that minimum payment on time, not less than what the minimum requirement is, and not late. So make that a priority. You have no idea how you're like, oh, I'll just pay it next month. And then you look at it like, okay, I'll pay it another month later. And now you're 90 days past due. And I've already told you that your payment history represents 35% of your credit score. So you paying late has a huge impact on your overall credit score. You're looking at it like, oh, I'm paying it. It might be 90 days later, but it can already have a very profound impact on your overall credit score. Other things you must do. Know and control the amount of available credit you utilize. Know how much total lending people have allowed you to actually have. If you happen to have a credit card and your credit card limit is $5,000, but you tend to carry close to $4,800 on it and you're just making the minimum payments to stay within that, that is killing your credit score. That is killing your credit score. You want to be someplace closer to, hey, if I have a $5,000 credit card, I actually don't want to carry any more than $500 to $1,000 worth of credit on that particular card at any point in time. You want to be functioning within there, and that's going to give you the greatest overall positive impact on your credit score. All right, next, don't close credit cards after you actually pay them off. Reason one, when you close older credit cards, it negatively impacts the credit history portion of your credit score that contributes to 10% of your credit score. Number two, you close the credit card, you reduce the available credit limit that your actual current debt is measured against. When you cancel that credit card, you'll immediately see a decline in your overall credit score. Crazy, right? I know, but it's the way it works. Avoid department store cards. They get you because, of course, they're like, oh, if you actually open up a credit card today, you can save 20%, 30% on this initial purchase. The problem with that is the lending rate is far greater for these types of cards than traditional credit cards. And the other problem that you actually run into in that is you start opening so many of these that you haphazardly are looking for the occasional savings and discounts. And at the end of the day, whatever amount you saved on the initial purchase that you actually placed on the credit card, you're going to pay that 10 times over because you borrowed the money. You have to get to the point where you can tell yourself, if I can't afford to pay this off at the end of the month, I really can't afford to actually have it. Because we all have this desire for these doodads, for these trinkets. And you have to be patient in terms of when and what we can actually have. So next, let's talk about knowing your overall limit on your credit inquiries. So, there are times where they'll tell you, when we go to run your credit, it won't have a negative impact, or it'll have a minimum impact. If you're actually out looking for a car and you are going to different places, the best thing for you to do is actually print a copy of your credit score. And when you're serious about making a purchase, when you're sitting down with them, you're serious about it and getting your financing, then go ahead and provide them with a copy of your credit scores and allow them to run a credit check. But you don't want to be going to 6 or 7 different places and having your credit score ran 6 or 7 different times. It's the same thing even when you're talking about considering getting a credit card. Every time that hits, it impacts up to 10% of your overall credit score, the credit inquiry. So when you start being knowledgeable about how you can impact your credit score positively or negatively, because in your head you know that there are just 5 categories, it really helps you figure out how do you impact your credit. So again, let's recap. There are 5 areas: your payment history, which represents 35%, your credit utilization, which represents 30%, the number of inquiries, which represents 10%, the different types of credit accounts, which represents 10%, and the length of your credit history, which represents 15% of your overall credit score. So again, mastering the payment history, making sure you're paying things on time, making sure you're not maxing out your available credit, staying at less than 20% is ideal. That's the sweet spot of your total credit available to you. And then the overall length of your credit history. These things all have a profound impact on your overall credit score. Okay, so let's see where you actually stack up in terms of your credit and debt usage compared to average Americans. So we'll break this down in terms of total percentages. All right, so what we're saying is, what's the total credit line you actually have? The total number of line items that you have available to you to borrow against, and what percentage of your total available credit are you actually utilizing. So 56% of Americans utilize greater than 71% of their overall credit. That means they're carrying debt that's 71% of their total available agreed upon lending. So that's an F grade. That's an F grade. Now, really pay attention to where this is. That's 56% of Americans, which basically tells you most Americans are living the quality of life that they want based on their credit cards, based upon lending. 7.2% utilize somewhere between 51 to 70%. That's a D grade. 7.8% utilized between 31 to 50%. That's what we would classify as a C grade, which is decent, but it's still, you're headed in the wrong direction. Again, you want to be able to show that you can control your spending, and you have mastered managing your credit. 10% of Americans utilize somewhere between 11 and 30%, or carrying somewhere between 11 to 30% of their available credit. And so that's a B grade. Not bad, but you want to be in that A grade. So 18.6% of Americans utilize between 0 and 10%. Now, of course, 0 is not beneficial to you either, because you can carry these open lines of credit, but if you're not borrowing against it, then it doesn't show future lenders that you have mastered the art of managing and paying your debt, being in control of it. You want to be somewhere between 7 to 10%. Again, the sweet spot is around 7%. That's where you start to peak in terms of impacting that 35% category, which says how much of my credit score is impacted based upon credit utilization. Okay, I'm sorry, that I should have said 30%, not 35%, is impacted based upon your credit utilization. So again, this scale measures the debt you created against your total available credit. All right. So again, this is just another way of looking at what we just looked at before. If you are functioning within that A range, you're utilizing less than 10% of your credit. If you're in the B range, you're utilizing less than 30% of your available credit. C is less than 50. D is less than 70. And if you're in F grade, you're somewhere between utilizing 70% to 100% of your available credit. So, 10 things that will help you improve your overall credit score. One, check your credit report 3 times a year, every 4 months. So, there are 3 different places you can go to do this. So, in January, I recommend checking your Equifax score. In May, I recommend checking your Experience score. And in September, I recommend you checking your TransUnion score. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in depth when we get to the appendix for this. When checking your credit report, highlight anything that you actually need to improve. Start building a strategy against it. Develop a plan to improve your credit score. Now that you understand how your credit score works, now you can develop a plan against it to say, what are the things I can do that have the greatest impact on the individual contributors to my total credit score. Resolve any late payments and set up payment reminders. We all pretty much have smartphones now, so put it on your calendar to pay every month so that you don't screw your credit up simply because something went past your thought. There's nothing worse than having the available cash to pay what you owe and then forgetting about it and letting that have a negative impact on your credit score when you actually could have paid it. All right. Get favorable credit cards. All right. Get favorable credit cards, meaning know what the ideal credit card interest rates are going to be when you apply. Just because somebody's willing to give you a credit card doesn't mean it's a credit card you want to take. You pick and choose those that are in favorable terms relative to what's important to you. All right. Carry between 7 to 10% of your total credit limit, no more. All right. So if you realize, hey, I'm going to spend and it's going to peak me out above. So let's say, again, you have $1,000 credit limit. And now you're saying, listen, I'm going to put more than $100 onto this credit card. And if you see it as, hey, I'm trying to get points or something when I actually, on my credit card, when I actually do this, make that payment before the payment is actually due. So if you decide to do that, make the purchase, go home and write the check and pay the credit card to keep you within that 7 to 10%. All right. Now, again, that requires a lot of discipline, but I'm telling you, it'll be highly beneficial. Open a secured credit card only if you have poor credit score and you're trying to improve your credit. But don't accept any secured credit cards. Stay away from those. We'll talk a little bit more about those as well. Fix your credit utilization ratio. All right, target less than 30% initially. Try. Most people watching this are probably in that F range, but you want to slowly work yourself down, or target it, write a check, and pay off that debt and get down to, less than 30%. When you're working with someone, if you're trying to buy a home and you're dealing with a company that can help you improve your credit score, these are the exact same things they're going to tell you to do. And you don't have to actually pay to get this information. You just have to actually do it. All right. And then please, 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 when you know better, do better. Don't repeat the same mistakes twice. All right. And then teach your kids how credit works. Sit down and walk through how credit works with your kids, because most kids jump right out. They leave their parents home, and of course, they'll give anyone a credit card that's breathing. And if you got a job, they'll give you a credit card. If you got a job, they'll let you get a car note within these lending institutions, and they force us to believe that we have to have these things when you really don't. And we'll talk a little bit more about managing that as well. But the problem again is our kids repeat. These are generational curses. Our kids will repeat what they watch their parents do, and they think it's okay because we've done it. We have to teach them different. We have to set a better example. Your quality of life changes drastically by improving your credit, and your credit is directly tied to how much debt you're carrying. So if you minimize your debt and you maintain positive credit score, a lot of the headaches, a lot of the things that are keeping you up at night, they go away. They go away. All right. We have to get out of this mindset of wanting things. If you're out spending and buying a lot of things, you have to really ask yourself, what's at the root of my spending? Why am I so unhappy that I'm trying to make myself happy by buying things? All right. It's a bigger problem. All right. So in summary, we talked about what impacts your credit score. You should always grade yourself and ask yourself, where do I stack up against other Americans on my debt usage? I want you guys to be in that A grade space. And then we talked about the 10 things you should do to improve your overall credit score. All right, your overall credit score. So I want to go ahead and go into a little greater depth. So let's go into the appendix and give a little more detail to some of the things we talked about. Okay, so we talked a little bit earlier about free credit reports. You're entitled to a free copy once a year of all three of your credit reports under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So again, these aren't things you have to actually pay for. You just have to contact these organizations to get them. The reason I'm telling you guys don't ask for your credit report from all three credit bureaus at the same time is that will be a snapshot in time. So then if later on in the year you want to have a quick run to check your credit score, you're going to have to actually pay for that report. So as of right now, you don't actually have to do that if you're just strategic about when you want to request these, and do them on a regular basis. Now, of course, if you get ready to make a purchase and somebody goes to run your credit history, you want to be in a position where you know what your credit score is. There's nothing worse than going in and saying you want to buy something and they say, what's your credit score like? And you say, I don't know. That's a red flag to them that they're going to give you an absorbent interest rate on whatever they lend to you, because that tells them you're not credit savvy. That means you're not a keeper of your credit score. All right. And it depends on what you're willing to pay to keep track of that. So I actually utilize an app called Experian, and I pay like $15 a month just so that I can see what's happening on my credit report every month, specifically with Experian. And it allows me to see what my credit score is. And that's just for me a small price to pay, just for me to keep track and know that I'm within my desired target range of where I want my credit score to be. Next, let's take a look at a quick checklist of questions to ask yourself when reviewing your reports for errors. Is all your personal information correct? Social security number, birth date, full name, address, etc. Are all of your credit accounts being reported? So are all of the line items that you're running against that you know of, are they actually reported? Are there any late or missed payments listed that you remember making on time? Be in a position to actually dispute this. Credit card companies do make mistakes. Lenders do make mistakes. Are there any accounts or applications for credit that you don't actually recognize? We're at an all-time high with information theft and identity fraud. So this is why I'm really an advocate. I've actually had my credit card information stole 3 times on my American Express, 3 different times over the last 10 years, where I've actually, now had I not been checking my credit scores and my reports on a regular basis, and had I not been dealing with an American Express card that notified me to say, hey, there was some activity that occurred that's out of your spending or out of your habits, it allowed me to jump on it immediately before it became a problem, shut that card down, and then have another one reissued. So these are just little things where it's about being proactive. Are there any items from decades ago that still actually appear on your report? You know, these are things you want to think about. There are statute of limitations in terms of when things should be removed from your credit report. Um, Even if it's delinquent, and I'll get into that a little bit later in terms of how do you best manage that as well. So that's something to think about. And then let's talk about this opening a secure credit card thing. A secure credit card is a type of credit card where, if you're making a deposit into a checking account, that's secure. The line of credit with the bank is extended to you. For example, you can open a checking account and put $500 in it and get a line of credit for that $500. All right. You can get a secured card with bad credit. Adding a new account and creating a positive payment history will go a long way in showing creditors that you've matured in your debt management. If you default in the payments on a secured credit card, then the deposit you made initially will be used to cover the overall balance of the card. So it doesn't allow you to get out of whack. All right. But again, ladies and gentlemen, our objective again is to master our money. We make a lot of money. We just spend more than we make. We get caught up in wanting to keep up with the Joneses, and we got to have the new car. We get emotional in our purchasing and our buying, and you can't understand why you're not enjoying life, because money matters on the brain causes a lot of stress on most men. It causes a lot of stress on most women. So you can't have two people in a marriage or two people that are dating and they're both bad with managing their money, because that's going to be a recipe for disaster. All right, so you have to really stick to these principles in terms of money management. All right, so I hope this has actually helped you. Stay tuned. I'm going to do another post really soon explaining to you what debt to pay off and when to pay it off, and what debt not to pay off, and how if you have creditors calling you and you're more than a couple of years behind on the debt payments, and if that debt has actually been sold to a credit collection agency, I'll tell you why you should never pay that stuff off. All right, I'll tell you why you should never pay debt off that's coming from a credit or a credit collection agency, because they purchased that debt from the original lenders. Let's say you're talking AT&T, and with AT&T you had a cell phone bill, and let's say the cell phone bill was $500. You went delinquent on it, haven't paid it in years, closed that account out, and now 3 years later you have a credit collector calling you saying, hey, you still owe this debt that to AT&T, and based upon interest that has been accrued based upon what the original amount was, now you owe $1,000. And if you agree that one, that's your debt, and B, you agree to make a small payment, then you open that line of debt up again for a 7-year review on your credit report. So I'll explain to you how that all works, because there's a statute of limitation on how long that debt can loom over your head. And if you make small payments on it, that just keeps that debt running and occurring. So we'll talk about that. That'll be really important. So stay tuned for that post. All right, I hope this has been helpful. Give me your comments. Go ahead and share with other people. Click like, and make recommendations on other things you'd like to know more about, and things you wish I would have went in more detail about or less detail about. This is open dialogue. All right, enjoy your day. God bless. Thank you for watching Things My Dad Didn't Teach Me, TMDDTM, and stay tuned.